Section 13.4, using equilibrium constants. After this video, go check out video problems 73 through 75. So we're just going to talk about the big picture. The video problems will do the actual calculations as normal. Okay, so let's talk about a large equilibrium constant. So this means when I solve this equation, where I have the products taken to some power, and I have each reactant taken to some power, right? The equilibrium constant K. If I have a large equilibrium constant K, that means that I have a lot of products form. All right. So take a look at this first graph here. All right. We start out with sulfur dioxide and oxygen. Notice that the graph for sulfur dioxide is twice as large as the graph for oxygen. That's because it's a 2-to-1 ratio. So we have a perfect stoichiometric ratio here. Now, when those two react, I form mostly sulfur trioxide over here on the product side. You can see I have mostly sulfur trioxide, very small amounts of sulfur dioxide and oxygen. And here's one thing I want to point out. When you're dealing with equilibrium, right? When you're dealing with equilibrium, the stoichiometry, in other words, the mole-to-mole ratio works for the reactant side, the mole-to-mole ratio works for the product side, but the mole-to-mole ratio for the reactants to the products does not work. Okay, and that's where you have to use the equilibrium expression. All right, but so just to sort of prove that point, notice that sulfur dioxide here is still a 2-to-1 ratio. All right, for the concentration. Now we have a lot of sulfur trioxide, and so what we say is that the forward reaction is favored in this case. And because, you know, we form more of that product. We can also say that the products drive the reaction. So that's another term. All right. Now, why is it that a large K in this case? Well, because it's products over reactants, right? So we have a relatively large number over a relatively small number. So that's why K ends up being relatively large. By relatively large, we mean larger than 1. Okay? Now, down below, we can see this is a small K. So up here on our notes, we can see a small equilibrium constant means few products form. So here's an example of that. Right? Chapter 13, figure 13.9. Right? So here are our reactants, the 1-to-1 ratio, nitrogen to oxygen. And take a look. If I draw as straight a line as I can over, we're losing very little of those reactants. We're forming very few products. And so if I look at K, products over reactants, I see that I have a small number, products, over a large number of reactants. So this K is going to be small. And by small, we mean less than 1. All right? So here, this sort of sums it up. A small Kc, and again, that's going to be a Kc that's less than 1. And over here, this is going to be a Kc that's greater than 1. Here are just some examples. You know, larger than 1, larger than 1, larger than 1. So we have mostly products formed in the equilibrium. Right? Then smaller than 1, and again, mostly reactants. And then the video problems will look at how we can calculate the equilibrium concentration from the equilibrium constant. Now we also use things called the ice table, and again, you'll see that in the video problems. A lot of times students ask, when are we supposed to use the ice table? If you're not given all the equilibrium information, you're supposed to use the ice table. But you'll see that in the video problems.